everyone. Happy Thursday, and welcome to the ACLU of Pennsylvania's All Membership webinar. My name is Claire Landau. I use she, her pronouns, and I currently serve as the Acting Executive Director here at ACLU-PA. I want to start by thanking you all for being with us today. This work that we are doing to advance civil liberties takes all of us, staff, volunteers, clients, community partners, and supporters who are dedicated to fighting for a Pennsylvania that is better for us all. We appreciate all that you do to advance our shared work, and that means showing up here today too. So we like to take the first few minutes of these calls to provide a broad overview of our organization and the work that we do, especially for those of you who are newer to the organization. So to that end, the American Civil Liberties Union is a national, nonpartisan organization founded over 100 years ago. We do not endorse candidates for office. Here in Pennsylvania, we are a staff of roughly 40 with offices in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Harrisburg. And we have around 40,000 members in the state and over 100,000 supporters. Nationwide, the number is approximately 1.75 million members. Our priority areas here in Pennsylvania are 1, decarceration, 2, police reform, and 3, voting rights. And while we spend 70 to 80% of our work geared towards these top priority issue areas, the rest of our time is designed for us to remain nimble, to be able to respond to other emerging civil rights threats, like reproductive rights and LGBTQIA+ equality. All of our work incorporates authentic belonging, inclusion, diversity, and equity, and racial justice. I'm proud of my accomplished colleagues who live this work day in and day out. One of the things that is important to us here at ACLU-PA is increasing the diversity of our organization, every aspect, including our membership and our supporter base, so that it reflects the state that we live in and the communities we serve. With our webinars, there's often a broad range of folks who call in. Some of you have been supporting our work for decades, and some of you are new to our work. We're delighted to have all of you join us today. So a little about today's topic. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court is one of the most powerful institutions in our Commonwealth. It decides whether state laws are constitutional, and it's the final authority on how to interpret Pennsylvania laws that impact our day-to-day lives. From abortion rights to criminal, legal, and policing reform to your fundamental democratic right to cast a vote that is counted, our freedoms depend on who sits on the court. This year, we will elect a new justice to the court. Today, we're going to hear from a few of my colleagues on what is at stake this November. Before we get started, a few logistics. So shortly, I'm going to bring on our moderator and panelists to the stage. They're going to have a 40-minute discussion, and we'll leave some space at the end for Q&A. As an FYI, this webinar is recorded. We plan on posting it on our YouTube, so please share the knowledge and guide others in your community towards the session. If you need closed captions, you can enable that feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen under Live Transcript. We'll be utilizing the Q&A function during the call, so please use it. And for folks who've dialed in, you can submit your questions as well by emailing donate@aclupa.org, and we will be sure to follow up with you. So now I'd like to welcome our moderator and panelists to the stage. So our 3 of my accomplished colleagues. Our moderator today, Becca Kusumanu-Seidel, is our Policy and Engagement Associate, who spends much of her time focusing on our voting rights work. Our panelist, Danitra Sherman, is Deputy Advocacy and Policy Director. She directs our Supreme Court work and brings with her deep campaign experience. Our second panelist, Pajer-Rogers, is Senior Communications Strategist here, who also comes to ACLU-PA with extensive campaign experience. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Becca, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you to our panelists, my colleagues, for this discussion today. Let's start by providing a level of context around the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court. Danitra, we'll start with you. Is Pennsylvania unique in how we elect Supreme Court justices?
Yes, so I will say when it comes to Pennsylvania, there are two things that come to mind when we think about the uniqueness and how we do things here in the wonderful Commonwealth. So the first thing that I would like to mention, which I think is very important, and we'll dive a little bit deeper later in the conversation, is that PA is the only state that holds judicial elections solely in an odd number of years. I think it's important to note that because often, people are not as engaged or aware of what is going on and what's on the ballot. So definitely wanted to note that point. And then the second point, we are actually one of 8 states that use partisan elections to initially select judges. And then after that, we use partisan or nonpartisan retention elections to determine whether judges should remain in their seat. So solely odd numbers, and then one of 8 to use partisan elections to get folks elected to these positions.
Ian, from a communications perspective, do you find that Pennsylvanians know how Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices become Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices?
Well, I think it's like any non-federal major election. If you're not voting for president or Congress, there's a certain percentage of people who pay attention and who know what's kind of going on, and are very aware of the Supreme Court election. But there's also a whole percentage of people who are not aware and who need to be educated and informed that there's an election and that these are the candidates and here's where they stand. And that's really what we're after with this campaign, is making sure that we're communicating all those urgencies.
Thank you. Yeah, I think about 20% normally, typically in a odd number year, participate in voting of registered voters. And so that's something to be aware of. As Claire and you all mentioned, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decides cases and interprets state laws that affect Pennsylvanians' freedoms. What impact does Pennsylvania Supreme Court have on the issues that the ACLU works on?
Yep. So I will say, just to piggyback off of Ian really quickly, I think it's important to also note when we talk about elections, especially, elections that are happening at the state, and I'll even say local elections, I always like to remind people, and maybe this is my biased opinion, but I think it's fact, that, when it comes to elections, like everyone wants to go out and vote for presidential elections. But honestly, yes, that is important, but also what's happening at our state and local levels are even more important, because these are the people that are actually having a direct impact on our lives on a day-to-day basis and what is going on and how we live our lives. So I just wanted just to make that plug, because I think that sometimes, that is overlooked or missed in the conversation, because I think of all the, I won't say glitz and glamour, because these presidential elections haven't been that glamorous these past times. But I think that people get caught up in like all the hoorah with these federal elections and just really lose sight of what's happening within their own home state and home base. But when it comes to the Supreme Court or the state Supreme Court here in Pennsylvania, I would say with us, we've already mentioned this and noted, and I just want to reiterate it, that we do not endorse candidates. We don't, oppose anyone running for office. Folks qualify, they can run for office. But for us, it's just making sure that, our supporters, our members, and the constituency groups that we fight for on a daily basis are able to make informed decisions when they go to the polls. And when we think about the Supreme Court, I can honestly say, just even in having like conversations, I think that sometimes people don't realize the true power that the state Supreme Court has when it comes to the different issues. And so for us, it's not necessarily about a specific individual. We just want to make sure that there are people on this court that are going to fight for and protect civil liberties. And so when we think about civil liberties and the work that we do here at the organization, and looking at this election, voting and abortion rights come up as like the top things that we're focusing on, in partnership with a number of our partners across the state that are engaged in this race. And I will say for us, it's definitely very important. While if you look at it from a political standpoint, the way that it sits now is 4-2 on the when we talk about the Supreme Court justices, and 4 Democrats, 2 Republicans. However, when we talk about some of the issues, especially as it relates to voting, while you assume that someone may vote a certain way, that is not always the case, as there have been several cases where there have been decisions I won't go too much into like the nitty gritty of them all, but just like giving a couple of examples. There was a case that went before the state Supreme Court where the court was deadlocked on the issue of counting mail ballots that were missing or had incorrect handwriting dates on the return envelope. This all came about because the GOP, wanted to have like, oh, they needed relief because of the death of one of the justices. The good thing I will say in this regard, is that, well, not the good thing. What I will say is that for this particular case, it caused a lot of confusion, because it's like, okay, well, what do we do? Like, are we setting things aside? Like, how are we getting prepared for, for the election? And like the good things that we were able to prevail in the end. But if we have a justice that is elected, they can be a teetering point, and it may not always go in the favor that's beneficial to voters, especially when we think about voter disenfranchisement and that being a real issue. And then another court case, excuse me, you all, the court was deadlocked on an appeal from the Commonwealth Court that related to counties giving voters notice of defects in mail-in ballots and allow them to procure them. For me, if there was an error, I would love to be notified of that to make sure that my vote is being counted. And so there was, pushback about that. There was just like talks that the counties were violating like constitutional rights by letting people know that they had like small errors. This did go to the Commonwealth Court first before it went to the state Supreme Court. And the good thing here, I will say, is that because of the deadlock, it affirmed what had happened in the Commonwealth, and that counties were able to let people know, like, hey, the date may be missing, or you have a scribble on this envelope, in order for them to actually have their vote be counted. So again, that was a win for us, but also understanding that depending on the next justice, that may not always be the case. And so we just want to make sure that, again, we have folks who are going to, do the right thing, do what's in the best interest of the people, because that's what we're all here to do.
And I would just add, I agree with everything Danitra said about the urgency, and to add another level of urgency here, beyond just this election year. Yes, we have a 4-2 majority right now. No, that doesn't always mean that the Democratic majority votes the way that we think they would. And yes, I mean, if a Democrat wins this election year, then that majority is retained. But here's the catch: within just a couple of years, every single other justice on the court is going to be up for a retention vote for a 10-year term. And we've seen with the U.S. Supreme Court how quickly the balance of power can shift from, a slight left-leaning bend that we had just a few years ago to now a hard right majority. And so even though the stakes may not feel, just looking at the numbers, like there's a huge amount of urgency there, it really is. And the issues that Danitra mentioned, the balance of the power of the court, this is all going to be at stake here very quickly. And we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to give ourselves every opportunity to win for civil liberties and voting rights and abortion in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and I would
But
just
Danitra,
add really quick.
go ahead. Mhm.
I'm sorry, Becca. I'm sorry. Then we'll give you back the mic. So sorry. No, I think that Ian raised a good point. So I just really want to like tag onto that really quickly. And just speaking about the retention vote. And while these votes happen and like these are like 10-year blocks, it's just also important to note as well that the chances of someone not retaining, their position is like very, very small. So it's even more important and more crucial, to Ian's point, that we are engaged and know what's going on, because these people are going to be making decisions most likely for the rest of our lives. So I just wanted just to add that extra emphasis on that. So sorry, Becca. Mike, back to you.
This is noted. I appreciate that. And I kind of want to dive a little bit more into the other cases that we have seen recently before the Supreme Court, and what kind of rights that they ensured, or what the potential would be. So, some things that come to mind are the vote by mail ballots that were before the Supreme Court, Act 77, which was enacted in 2019, and then any kind of reproductive or abortion rights. What do you have anything to kind of add to that?
Yeah, so I'll say starting with abortion, because that's one of like the main messaging points for us for this particular election, just because of like the polling that has occurred. In recent years there have been cases. One of the most recent cases that have been heard before the state Supreme Court was centered around whether mandated tax dollars could be used to pay for elective abortions. And, there was conversation around like the Medicaid fund usage. And then more recent, as well as you noted, Becca, when it comes to like the voting by mail, there were efforts um, to overturn the results of the presidential election. But thankfully we didn't have to worry about that, and we prevail. But just knowing the wave of nonsense, I will say, I think that's a good word to say, the nonsense that was happening in the past presidential election. I mean, it had us all on pins and needles, and just knowing that a lot of these decisions about what's going to be counted, what's going to be verified, for these elections come before our state Supreme Court is definitely important to uplift. And then also too, just thinking about the Act 77 being upheld, there was also a case before our state Supreme Court to where pretty much folks, I would just say folks did not want mail-in ballots to be law. But thankfully that was upheld by our state Supreme Court. And I will say it's something that is very convenient, especially for a state where we do not have what I would say like a traditional early voting, but it just really allows for another avenue to make sure that people's voices are heard and that they really have use that tool of power to make sure that they're, voting in these elections.
All right, I'm going to transition a little to, we recognize the urgency of this moment and the importance of this election. I want to ask, what are we doing, the ACLU? What's our approach to this work?
So yes, I will say that we are doing a number of great things. In order for us to really inform voters, we are taking a multi-efforted approach in order for us to really get the information out there about not just the issues that are being impacted by this particular election, but also the role of the state Supreme Court justices, because we feel like there is a slight, gap in people being aware and understanding of the role of these individuals. And so for us, it's really just engaging people in every single way. Of all the folks that are running campaigns for this election, and again, we're not endorsing anyone, we're just educating folks on, where the candidates stand on the issues. But we are one of the ones that are investing a significant amount in this particular race. We are investing over $1 million in collaboration with our national office to really educate and inform voters. We are looking at doing a mail program focusing on Philadelphia and Allegheny counties, to where we'll send mail to let folks know where our candidates stand on the issues. We'll be using radio, social media, and what we call OTT ads, where we're like having ads on streaming services, which I'll like pivot to Ian to talk more about. But we really are trying our best to just meet people where they are, literally and physically. While we have not traditionally done like field programs when it comes to elections, we are also running a small volunteer program in some of our target counties, focusing on Philadelphia, Berks, Lancaster, to really engage folks, to build capacity, to let people know that, look, the ACLU is here. We are a trusted, resource to make sure that people have what they need whenever they go to the polls. And so we're doing phone banking, we're doing texting, we're also doing canvassing. So again, we're just really trying to, meet people where they are in every way possible.
Yeah, the digital stuff has been exciting. We're trying some new things this year that we haven't done before. As Danitra mentioned, we're running some streaming video ads, and even have a new colleague of ours who is able to do animation and has made this video in-house. It's very exciting. We've been using Hulu to advertise for the first time. So if you're a Hulu watcher with ads, you may have seen the animated ad come across your screen. We're also putting that ad, of course, on the kind of standard social media channels. We're using TikTok a little bit more and trying to wade into those waters and make sure that we're getting the word out to the audience that uses TikTok, which tends to be a little younger. We'll be running some radio ads in select parts of the state. And we will soon have a second video advertisement that's going to be coming out again on Hulu, on Facebook and Instagram. It'll be on YouTube, but you can find our initial ad on YouTube right now. And one other thing I'd like to say, about, we've talked about the urgency of this election and why we're going all in on a lot of levels. But this is also preparation for next year, right? This is in some ways a test run for what's going to be potentially the election of our lifetimes. So all these new systems that we're implementing, things that we're testing out, things that we haven't necessarily done before, it's all really exciting, and it's great to see that it's going well, and that's what we need for 2024, because it's going to be an interesting year and an intense year. So
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Danitra. My next question is the action. What action can people take? What can we do with all this information? And how do we hope our members and supporters will respond?
Well, I'll start by saying, like, the most immediate thing that comes to my mind is, one, making sure you individually go out and vote on election day, or you submit your mail-in ballot before 8 o'clock p.m. on election day, to make sure that your vote is counted. So that would be the number one thing to me. And then in addition to that, someone coming from like an organizing background, we like to call it relational organizing, where we identify, a friend or, family member, loved one, to bring them along the ride with us. And so not only are you going to vote, but making sure that those close to you are going to vote as well. And that, y'all are having conversations about what is at stake, what is going on, so that they can be informed. So for me, it's like vote, vote, vote. Take a friend, take a loved one, take a family member, as many people as you can, to the polls with you, or again, push those folks to submit their mail-in ballots. But the number one thing is to really just vote, to make sure that your voice is heard.
And if folks want to go, I mean, not right now, because this is a enthralling webinar, I'm sure. But if after the webinar, if folks want to go to the website, aclupa.org, on the front page there's a link, a very prominent link to more information about the election. And so, yeah, you can find more information there. Also, look at our social media, share the video, share other information we post about the election, or that other groups are posting about this election. The more we can get the word out about it, the better chance that people will show up and vote, of course. And that really is the challenge here. I don't think that if you walked up to any Pennsylvanian on the street and said, hey, abortion rights are on the ballot this November, that there'd be a problem with them going to vote. It's just that people don't realize that there's an election, and that's really the hill that we're trying to climb here. So the more you can share that information, or post it yourself, post organically, just let people know. And yeah, as Danitra said, vote and bring 5 friends on election day.
That's great. When I work with our voter ambassadors, one of the charges that I give them is to be super sharers of our social media. And when I work with our advocates, our advocate academy, I can track to see who are our super advocates. And so I guess my challenge to everyone on this call is to be a super sharer and a super advocate. How can, besides being a digital sharer or a caller to their legislator on the other other programs that we work, how can our listeners get involved with our work, maybe physically?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we are, embarking upon a number of volunteer efforts, from phone banking to canvassing to text banking. I mean, so look, the more the merrier, the more the better. So if folks are definitely interested in helping us get the word out and talk to voters, I welcome you. Please come, please come. And I will say, some of you probably may have already received an email, but we'll definitely have more emails coming for folks to sign up for shifts, to really just engage in this effort with us. And again, by this being something that is a little bit newer for us as an organization, we're just really super excited about it. And just emphasizing the point that Ian made, this is also really just setting the groundwork and building for 2024, because there's going to be even more at stake. And we're definitely going to be making sure we're doing our part to engage our volunteers, to get them, in the loop with our advocacy efforts, and to really like be in the movement with us and taking action and being on the ground. So yes, if you're interested, please let us know. Look, we want as many people as possible. And like I said, following this, this webinar, we'll definitely send out a follow-up email just to make sure that people have the sign-up links to get involved.
You can also go to our, in addition to the emails Danitra mentioned, you can also go to the website, and under ACT, there's a volunteer sign-up form.
All right. When we were thinking about the work that the ACLU does on voting rights, we do it before, during, and after all elections. This is a year-round, like our other colleagues say, 365-day a year effort that we are ensuring Pennsylvanians who are qualified to vote can vote and have that vote counted. But we know that there is a concerted, deliberate effort to undermine the credibility of Pennsylvania's elections. So how do you both suggest that we counter that effort?
So I will start, and honestly, I will say highlight some of the work that we do around elections that may not be specific to educating and informing voters about particular candidates and races. But I always have appreciated the election protection work that we do, and by someone who has interacted with that part of the work prior to being a staff member here and working with some of my awesome colleagues, is that you know sometimes people go through a lot when going to the polls. Like, I mean, I've individually heard stories about, machines not working, or, someone, especially when we have like the started the mail-in ballot piece, like if someone changed their mind, they can take their ballot with them to their polling place to actually vote in person and turn their actual mail-in ballot in, and like people being told that they can't do it. So I just want to uplift the election protection aspect because I mean, I know that I've given out that our hotline number personally to so many people in order for, them to get help and for them to actually be informed on what their rights actually are. Because sometimes it can get a little, I'll say scary for, just use the word scary when you are, trying to vote, you don't know what's going on, and someone who is supposed to be, an informed person that's there to help you, is like telling you something different and like trying to make it hard for you to use your vote as a tool of power. And so that would be the first thing that I would want to uplift, is that is something that we do. And then also to coming from an organization where we did do a lot of like field work and just understanding ACLU's role in so much of this voting work, especially behind the scenes, is that prior to me coming, like would definitely help out in like running like paid canvassing programs. And there were times that, volunteers, especially volunteers of colors, would be in certain areas and have to deal with just like racism, or having the cops told on them. And who do we call? We call the ACLU, because guess what, you can go in canvas, you're not soliciting, you're not doing anything wrong, and just being a resource to help folks. And I would just say, in addition to that, just overall, us being like a trusted resource for folks to get the information they need, and for them to really know like these are my rights, as a voter. These are my rights as someone, who may have been formerly incarcerated and don't know that they can still actually go and vote. And so for me, it's just really just being a resource in so many different ways, and just letting people know their rights around the clock, not just who to vote for, or not who to vote for, but not, the information of, making an informed decision, but just knowing your rights around the clock of actually being able to actually go and make a vote, whether it is at the polling now, like by mail-in ballots.
Yeah, and I would just add to all that two things. The first is, well, three things, I think. The first is, one great way that we can, all of us, whether you're an ACLU staff member or an ACLU member or just a fan, one thing that we all can do is sign up to be poll workers or election monitors on election day. That is a crucial role that, is often going understaffed because people are nervous about working at poll stations, unfortunately, these days. And that is a reality, but it's one that we need to face head on. And so that's one way to help protect elections, is to be a poll worker or an election monitor. And then as far as what ACLU PA is doing, in addition to what Danitra said, we will put out the call to count every vote on election night if there's any sort of question about who has come out ahead. We'll be patient. We will make sure that the process is seen through to the end. And to that end, we also have our, of course, legal team that is ready to go. And in 2020, we've worked on many, as Danitra said earlier, many cases, that some of which that went all the way up to the Supreme Court, that could have turned the election in a different direction. And so we will be ready. We will be watching. We'll have our hotline, as Danitra said, will be monitoring situations across the state if any irregularities happen. And, leading up to the election, we'll continue to remind people that the most recent elections that we've had have been some of the safest, most secure elections in American history. And regardless of the chatter on, the Fox News or on Twitter, these elections are actually really safe and secure. And so that's something we need to keep reminding people.
I want to transition now to the questions that we're receiving in the Q&A function. One of the questions reminds me of your answer, Danitra, and yours a little bit, Ian, about being a trusted source of information. And so the question, and it relates in this way. The question is, what should we do about the offensive brochures one candidate is distributing against another? And Ian, I'm going to turn this over to you because at the ACLU of Pennsylvania, we are for free speech, right? But we also know that with not uplifting false narratives is an important thing. So I think countering this kind of narrative with facts is important. But I will leave it up to our communications expert here as to how you would approach that question.
Sure. I mean, if you're getting pamphlet or see people distributing pamphlets that are putting out falsehoods or saying horrible things about a candidate, that's certainly within that, whoever created the pamphlets, First Amendment rights, as Becca said, but it's also within your First Amendment rights to throw those in the trash. And that's probably what you should do with them. As far as countering it, I think, look, one thing that we always have to remember, and this was crucial during the 2020 election when, there were so many allegations of horrible things happening within the election system that just turned out to be flat out lies. If we give those lies oxygen by addressing them directly, then we're just perpetuating the lies and helping the story grow in a way that we don't want it to obviously to do. So, addressing lies, misinformation, it's really important. We do that by sticking to our messaging, by playing on our messaging ground and not by playing on the opponent's messaging field. And so, if somebody wants to make an allegation of impropriety within an election here in Pennsylvania, we just remind them that no, these are, again, some of the safest and most secure elections in history. And we let the system play out. We count every vote. And at the end of the day, that's how we, ensure that we have a fair election process. So lies, they are nothing new in elections, but you should feel free to ignore them just as much as, people feel free to put them out there.
And I want to just add really quickly to that point that Ian made, just, with the ignoring piece, but then also, if you know or feel that the information that you're receiving about a candidate may not be true, I mean, again, like using your own network to really just like inform people as much as possible about where folks stand on the different issues, the work that they have done is very important, because when folks at times, unfortunately, are not aware about the different races that are happening, they may be swayed by different types of mail or information or literature that they receive. So again, we can't tell anyone how to vote, who to vote for, per se. But if you feel that like information is being misrepresented, like definitely reach out to your people in your circle and your network and just really educate them and point them in the right direction, so they can get accurate information about these candidates.
Like Ian has mentioned a number of times, there is much information on our website, and there's information on our other partner orgs websites as well. One place I'd like to uplift is the Committee of 70, also a nonpartisan organization that has a whole host of information on candidates, as well as accurate information about dates of election. So this gets to another question that I'm seeing in the chat. Is how many justices are running for the Supreme Court election? And then when is the election?
So, since we are out of the primary, there are two folks. You have a Democrat and you have a Republican. You have Daniel McCaffrey, who's running as a Democrat, and then you have Carolyn Carluccio, who is running as the Republican. And then when it comes to Sorry, y'all. Then when it comes to election day, voting day is November 7th. Again, you can go to the polls or you can like submit a mail-in ballot, but just making sure that if you do vote by mail-in ballot, that you get it submitted by 8 p.m. on election day for it to be counted. But election day is November 7th at the polls, or you can submit a mail-in ballot and just making sure that mail-in ballot gets to where it needs to get to by 8 p.m. on election day.
Yeah, and some of the deadlines for registering for this election are October 23rd to register, and to request a mail-in ballot is October 31st, Halloween. It can be a spooky kind of thing, but go ahead and request that. One other question that I am seeing here is for judicial retention votes, which there are, you will see on your ballot in November. Does it show up just as a yes, no vote? And do you want to speak a little bit about how retention for both Supreme Court, not on this election, but going forward, and then the other appellate courts works?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very simple. Yes, no. Since they have that position, it's not like another traditional election like what we're going through right now. For this race as well as some like the local judge races. So it literally comes up as yes, no. Simple majority. If you get yes, you stay in your spot. If you don't, then we have to, go through with an election. But yep, yes, no, simple majority, you get the yeses, you stay in that retention process. Is something that is, with the state Supreme Court as well as other races, judge positions, or seats that we have here in the state.
And what I would add to that as well is that upon retention, all partisan marks are removed, right? So you will not have any information about where this judge used to be, because this is the way of ensuring that justices and judges are nonpartisan. So yes, no. And what is a fun fact that we have realized, Danitra and Ian, that only one person in the history of Pennsylvania has ever not been retained upon retention? Is that right?
Sorry, I'm trying to come from you. That is correct. If I am not mistaken, maybe we should just like do like let's do a fact check this. But no, I'm pretty sure that is correct, Becca. Which is very interesting. And then again, it just speaks to the earlier point that Ian made, is that like, yeah, these people are here for the long haul. So we definitely have to vote wisely on election day.
One question is a procedural question about how people can change their requested mail-in ballot selection by actually going to the polls in person. And Danitra mentioned this. The process is you've requested a mail-in ballot, but you've changed your mind. And what you can do is you can take that entire mail ballot package, including the envelope, including everything, with you to the election office. This is how, or no, sorry, to the voting, to the polls. This is how I voted in 2020. I had it in my hand. I decided I wanted to vote in person. I went to the judge of elections. I asked her to spoil it. She spoiled it, and I voted regularly. This is important for everyone in Pennsylvania to know that this is a valid way to do it. And what we do not want is for people to go to the polls to have the ballot in hand and for a judge of election or someone else to tell you you have to vote provisionally. This is when you would call that handy dandy hotline 866-OUR-VOTE to get help with that, because that is not correct. We want you to vote regularly. I'm not seeing any other. Oh, go ahead. Please go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna just add to you, Becca, and just echo that the process is super easy. This past primary election, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna do, my mail-in ballot. But literally changed my mind, and like I didn't have any issues at all with taking my ballot, turning it over, and was in and out, and no issues at all.
So in the chat, I am seeing that there is a Questlove ad, which is terrific. It could be a national ad. It's not about voting per se. Do we know anything about that, or have we seen it?
I'm not sure which
Yeah, I don't
ad
know
is.
what that is.
they're referring to,
We
but
can
I'm
all
definitely
Google
gonna
this
Google and look it
afterwards.
up.
Yeah, because Questlove is, awesome. So I'm interested to seeing that. I am very sad that I do have Hulu ads and I have yet to see our colleagues ad. I keep waiting to see that. And these are all the questions that we're going to get to, I think, right now. Do you guys have anything else? Oh, sorry, there is one that just came in. What happens if I have an issue on election day? So the 866 Our Vote hotline is live always. You can leave a message and it will relay to our election protection volunteers. It is a nonpartisan hotline is run by the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights. If something escalates to the point where the people responding to that call can't get an answer, it gets elevated to the ACLU and our attorneys. So that 866 Our Vote line can receive calls now. What we are seeing is that it's not just on election day that people need help with mail ballots comes the 2 weeks before, where people are either having a hard time getting it, haven't received it, or having trouble with that. So that hotline is for use then as well. How about this? Where is the best place for people to find information on the candidates' positions on issues?
So I'll give you a short link to a different page on our website that is, this is getting a little technical here, but we have two different types of content that we put out. Stuff where we talk about the candidates is separate than just, hey, there's an election, go vote. And so the page that you see when you first go to the website is the just general information. But if you want more information about the candidates themselves, you can go to aclupa.org/Supreme Court PA. And Jackie, I'm sure, can put that in the chat as well. Or I can.
All right. One other just voting maintenance question that I see is, can the election workers tell that I have requested a mail ballot? The answer to that is yes. It is printed in the poll books. And that's a way of ensuring election accuracy, right? So if you have requested a mail ballot, that will be noted by your name. Anything to add to that, Danitra?
No, I don't have to. That's pretty straightforward. I mean, we just want to make sure, that, and I'll say we, ACLU, of course, but just when we talk about voting in general, all the different people, including poll workers, we just want to make sure that, we're doing the right thing, that there's transparency, that, it is secure. Because there are so many narratives that are flying around, but there are processes put in place to ensure that things are going the way they should be going.
All right. I think that we are going to wrap this up. And so I wanted to thank Danitra and Ian, and thank all of you for the great questions that you put in to the chat. If you've enjoyed today's discussion and are able to consider a gift today, please visit our website, aclupa.org/donate, to make a donation or to become a member. And then you can check out the various ways that we mentioned to get involved with our work. Well, with that, I really appreciate all of your time. It's been wonderful to be on screen with you, Danitra and Ian, and we look forward to seeing you all the next time we have an all-member call. Thanks.
Thank you.